So I'm Travis Harper. I'm an agronomist with University of Missouri Extension, based out of Henry County in the western part of Missouri. Heroes to Hives is a beekeeping education program that is intended specifically for veterans, specifically to address both their personal and financial well-being. It was originally started about 6 years ago in the state of Michigan by Adam and Grayo with Michigan State University, and we are bringing it to Missouri in 2021. This would be the first time that this program is offered outside the state of Michigan. This program came about, absolutely. So this would be a good question to obviously talk live with Adam about and have him tell you his story. But basically, this is Adam and Grayo's sort of baby, his sort of brainchild. He was active military, served overseas, got back from overseas because of an injury. He was no longer with his unit, that sort of thing. He just felt like he didn't have the camaraderie that he had before, and he wanted to get back into something, offer something back to veterans where veterans could really come together just for camaraderie purposes. And at the time, he was working on his PhD in entomology. He got involved in beekeeping and brought that to this group of veterans that he was sort of meeting with. And it really was a successful venture, both for him personally and also for the veterans that were involved. And he just decided to expand it from there. My colleagues, Karen Funkenbush and Johnny Harper, attended a conference about a year ago in Indiana where they heard Adam speak sort of more about the mental benefits of this program in terms of teaching veterans how to keep bees. And they were really interested in the program, came back to Missouri, got on the phone with Adam and said, Adam, can we bring this program to Missouri? And then they got me involved. I'm also a beekeeper. I've been a beekeeper for about 30 years. When I first started with Extension, we had a lot of interest developing in beekeeping. So I taught some beginning beekeeping classes, some advanced beekeeping classes. Then a few years ago, along with a team of other Extension professionals across the state, we started a program called the Missouri Master Pollinator Program, and that has done well. So this is sort of the next step in the work that I've been doing related to pollinators and honeybees, being the Heroes to Hives program. Brand new to me. And I can't pretend like I, know everything about what veterans have been through and the best way to approach them. But working with Karen, working with other folks at the University of Missouri, working with Adam at Michigan State University, really starting to get a feel on how to put together a beneficial educational program for this group of people. And I can tell you it is quite a bit different than just our typical everyday audience that we have for a lot of our programs. So a little bit about how the program is designed. So it is 9 months of online education with lectures coming out, pre-recorded lectures coming out every single week so that anybody that's taking the program can do so sort of at their own pace. Now, those online lectures are going to be offered through Michigan State University. So anybody, any veterans, even here in Missouri, that are interested into the program, they will sign up through Michigan State University. And that's where they'll get the bulk or the core of their training, that online portion. And we here in Missouri will be contributing videos, contributing lectures to that online portion as well. Now, the other aspect of the training is the hands-on, on-the-ground training. And they have that in Michigan, and that's what we're also going to have here in Missouri, specifically for our Missouri veterans that may be taking the class. So we have set up a teaching apiary in a partnership with the University of Central Missouri in Warrensburg, Missouri, and that will be our teaching apiary in 2021. So any veterans that are enrolled in the program for their hands-on training, they will come to one of our hands-on teaching sessions at the University of Central Missouri. But our plans are in the future to establish these teaching apiaries at locations throughout the state So any veterans across Missouri that may be interested in the program don't have very far to travel to get the hands-on portion of the training. Certainly less than 2 hours is travel time is what we're shooting for, and we'd like it to be a little bit closer to an hour. That would be the furthest that anybody is away from a teaching apiary. So obviously beekeeping is an important aspect of growing a wide variety of crops. I mean, we rely on honeybees and other pollinators for a lot of our pollination. So bees, keeping honeybees are a natural part of agriculture, but where it really shines, especially with veterans, is that we have a lot of veterans, once they get out of the service, they get interested in agriculture. They're typically interested in getting started on sort of a small scale, a small farm type situation. We've worked with these folks through our beginner farmer rancher program. They may get into small ruminant production, commercial horticulture production, farming basically on a smaller scale. And keeping bees really fits well into that, because to keep bees successfully, to make a significant side income from beekeeping, you don't need a lot of land, you don't need a lot of capital investment. So it's a really good opportunity for folks that are really getting into agriculture for the first time. Beekeeping is a great way to do that on sort of a small scale. Different categories of beekeepers. We have what are called hobby beekeepers, which are the majority of beekeepers that basically they keep bees for themselves, to have honey for themselves, maybe pollinate their garden. They may sell a little bit of honey to their family and friends, but for the most part, they're hobby beekeepers. We have sideline beekeepers. That's the next biggest category. And we still have many, many sideline beekeepers here in the state of Missouri. Typically still work a full-time job, maybe off farm, maybe they're full-time farmers, but their beekeeping efforts are a side business, and they contribute significantly to the overall farm income through the selling of honey, the selling of bees, production of wax, pollination services, things like that. And then here in Missouri, we just have a handful of what we call commercial beekeepers. And these are full-timers. That's all they do is keep bees. Not very many of those across the country, especially here in Missouri. That's quite an effort. It involves transporting hives across the country during different times of the year, like for pollination of almonds and apples and things like that. So it's a serious undertaking, but we can have all three categories. Most people that get into beekeeping from a business aspect or from the aspect to make some money, we'd call sideline beekeepers. When we look at some of our other programs, like the Beginning Farmer Rancher program and some of the other veteran programs that University of Missouri Extension works with, there are a lot of different grant and loan opportunities for veterans to get started in a career, in establishing a farm, things like that. And certainly beekeeping would fall under many of those programs, be an opportunity for folks to get either grants or loans to get started in beekeeping. This is going to be a sort of holistic training, for lack of a better word. So in the training, there's going to be our standard beekeeping information and education. There's also going to be a personal wellness aspect. We have a portion of the class called Yoga for Beekeepers. So there's all different aspects of that, but also will be included our sections on business, starting a small business, insuring your business, marketing, all that sort of thing will be part of the regular Heroes to Hives curriculum. So especially the details specific to Missouri, the logistics of when and where, and maybe a little bit even on what exactly we're going to be doing, we'll be able to answer some of those questions during the live stream later. Certainly with the overall focus of the program, the history of the program, Adam from Michigan State will be able to share that information much more effectively than I can. It is completely free to veterans, and not only veterans, but to their dependents that are over the age of 18. So that was the one stipulation that Adam had when he started this program, and as he's expanding this program, first to Missouri and then hopefully on to other states, is that it remained completely free for veterans. And that's accomplished primarily through donations, foundations, and grants. Dependents over the age of 18. So when we look at under the age of 18, there's just some liability issues there with children and the possibility of getting stung and having allergic reactions and that sort of thing. But originally, Adam started out the program for veterans only. And he really wanted to just have that bond of just the veterans meeting in a classroom out at the apiary and just sort of the relationship they had out there. And what he discovered after a year or two of doing this was a lot of the veterans that were attending the program had some service related disability. And a lot of them needed some assistance to get to and from the classes and even to get out to where the beehives were. And a lot of these veterans relied on their spouses, their adult children to help them get around. And so he wanted to include them as part of the training as well. Well, certainly from an aspect of getting people that are completely outside of agriculture right now into agriculture, increasing the overall number of farms, the diversification of our agriculture here in Missouri. Those are all important aspects of beekeeping training. Adding farms, getting new people involved in agriculture. Of course, the beekeeping industry itself has been growing exponentially over the last 10 to 15 years. With the number of new beekeepers that we've had due to information that folks have heard in the news about the decline of pollinators and colony collapse disorder, we're starting to see a whole lot of interest in beekeeping, pollinators, and certainly University of Missouri and University of Missouri Extension wants to be a source of practical information for these people that may be encountering University of Missouri Extension for the first time when they go looking for beekeeping information. Think about pollinators. You know, we're not talking just about honeybees. We're talking about some of our native pollinators like the bumblebees and mason bees and that sort of thing. But by far, honeybees are the most important pollinators because they're the ones that can be managed. I wouldn't say they could be domesticated because they can't, but we can put them in a location where we want them, keep them there, move them to a location where we need something pollinated. And that's what makes honeybees one of the most important. Well, how important is it? Well, you know, financial estimates about $20 billion worth in the United States per year in terms of the food being produced that would not be produced if it weren't for honeybees. In fact, when we think about the almond industry out in California, it's about a $6 billion industry, and that is completely dependent on honeybees and honeybees alone. So another estimate that they also give is about 35% of all food that we eat here in the United States is reliant on bees for pollination. So about a third or a little bit more than a third of all food we eat is reliant on pollination, which is one of the things that makes bees and honeybees so important. Get is, can you keep bees in town? And the answer for most cities and towns in Missouri is yes. It used to not be that way, but with the decline of pollinators, the interest in getting into beekeeping, not just from people in rural areas, but also from people in the suburbs and in cities. A lot of those cities and towns have relaxed sort of their restrictions on keeping bees, and keeping bees in town can be perfectly safe. That's one of the things that we educate beekeepers about in terms of making sure that these bees aren't interfering with their neighbors, that there's no issues, that sort of thing. We want beekeepers to have a good name and keep a good name. But it's certainly very possible. If we think about bees in general, or honeybees, excuse me, they will forage in any one direction from their colony about 2.5 to 3 miles, which is a long distance. So even if you're keeping bees outside of town, we have bees that are going into town to collect nectar and pollen. And I have no doubt that a lot of people have seen honeybees when they've been walking through their yard or walking down the sidewalk. So the bees are there. We just have to make sure that we keep them where they're supposed to be and that they don't interfere with anybody else. In fact, suburbs and cities are a great place to keep bees, but because to really provide the nutrition that bees need, we need flowers that are blooming at some point all growing season long. We want flowers blooming all the way from March through October. Now, out in rural areas, we often don't get that. We have more of a monoculture type growing situation where we have just corn or just soybeans, that sort of thing. But when we talk about suburbs, we talk about urban areas. We've got a lot of ornamental flowers. We've got raised bed gardens. We've got a lot of house plants that people put out on their porch, things like this. And these are all fantastic sources of pollen and nectar for honeybees. So cities and suburbs really make a lot of sense for keeping bees. With keeping bees in town tends to be water. So a lot of people don't think about it, but bees need water just like every other animal does. So if there's not a clean source of water nearby, we either have to provide one or they're going to go over to your neighbor's swimming pool to find water. And that's really where we run into a lot of issues is when the neighbors find a lot of honeybees in their swimming pools. The majority of our hobby beekeepers, which have less than 10 hives, to adequately take care of those hives throughout the season, check the hives when they need to, feed them when they need to be fed, medicate them, harvest the honey. For 10 hives, you're looking at about 6 to 8 hours of actual time over the course of a year, which is really minimal compared to the benefit that you get from those 10 hives in terms of honey and wax production and everything else. Now, what we find is people are usually don't have a problem with not having enough time to spend with the bees. What they've found is that they want to spend a lot more time looking through their colonies and going through their colonies than what the bees actually need. So that's a big problem with new beekeepers. New beekeepers are interested. They want to know what's going on there. So we certainly encourage them to spend that extra time watching the bees and learning about the bees, but it's really not necessary. It's just a handful of hours a year. Sideline, what we get into a lot, if we're talking a really big sideliner, 300-400 hives, something like that, a lot of times we have like school teachers that are on 9 to 10 month contracts for school during the year. They'll spend their 2 to 3 months of the summer, typically working their hives, doing work like that. And it's still, even though they're spending the majority of the summer doing that, it's not a 40, 60 hour a week type thing. They probably have to spend 15, 20 hours a week working on beehives during that 2 to 3 month time period. Don't know about honeybees is that they're not native to the United States. When we're talking about honeybees, we're talking about Apis mellifera, which is the European honeybee. So these are honeybees are completely not native to the United States. We have no native honeybees here in the United States. They're brought over from Europe. They were brought over to the United States, which would have been North America at that time in 1622, and they've been here ever since. And they do very well in all areas of the United States, all the way up to North Dakota, Minnesota, way down in California and Florida, even out in Hawaii and up in Alaska. They really do well, are adaptable to all kinds of areas that we have growing different things all over the country. We have a large number of different people that are interested in beekeeping, all the way from doctors to teachers to farmers to we have a lot of kids these days that are getting interested in beekeeping. So there's just a lot of variability out there. It's suitable for a lot of areas and a lot of different people. And if somebody's interested, then I would encourage them to contact University of Missouri Extension to find out more, if not necessarily the Heroes to Hives program, certainly some of our other efforts related to honeybees and beekeeping and pollinators. Tiptoed around that issue because I didn't want to come out and say it, but what I found talking to people is they're pretty upfront about, the benefit of that sort of thing. And Adam is very blunt about it and very in your face about it. So if he says it's okay to talk about, then then I'm okay talking about it too. But yeah, that's what we've heard from other veterans that we've been talking to here recently, for sure.
If you'd like to learn more about the Heroes to Hive program, come back at 3 p.m. Central Standard Time on our University of Missouri Butler County Facebook Live feed. If you would like to learn more about the program coming to Missouri, the contact information is on the screen.